In today's world, people take basic rights for granted as something entirely natural and inalienable. In ancient Rome, legal status was worth more than gold and literally determined a person's chances of survival. Millions of Mediterranean residents dreamed of obtaining the coveted bronze tablets confirming their membership in the elite of the great empire. Today, obtaining a foreign passport involves several years of red tape, but the Roman equivalent required a quarter-century of daily risk to one's life. The Roman state functioned as a closed elite club, surrounded by an ocean of disenfranchised subjects and conquered peoples. People without this coveted status paid higher taxes, were subjected to cruel punishments, and had absolutely no voice in court. However, the empire was wise enough not to close the doors completely, leaving a narrow and incredibly dangerous path to privilege. This path was so arduous that modern physiologists and sociologists would call it a trial beyond the limits of human endurance. Most historical myths boil down to the idea that the legions simply seized lands and enslaved all the local inhabitants. But the true genius of the Roman system lay in its ability to transform former enemies into the state's most devoted defenders. The highest reward for loyalty was not a sack of silver, but a legal document that forever changed the fate of an entire clan. However, the price of this paper was so high that many applicants remained buried in unmarked graves on the distant frontiers of civilization. The empire's population was clearly divided into two unequal categories, separated by an invisible yet insurmountable social wall. At the top of the pyramid were full citizens, who enjoyed absolute protection under the law and exclusive access to state benefits. At the very bottom were the peregrini, that is, free inhabitants of the provinces, deprived of any serious legal guarantees. The difference between these groups was colossal, resembling the chasm between a corporation's top managers and temporary, disenfranchised laborers. The peregrines made up the overwhelming majority of the population in the conquered territories, from Britain to the scorching sands of North Africa. The state allowed them to live according to their local customs, but in any conflict with a Roman, the law always sided with the citizen. This created an atmosphere of constant vulnerability, where a lifetime's work could be destroyed by the decision of a single biased official. This is precisely why the provincials so desperately sought to elevate their status, trying to escape the zone of constant legal risk. Citizen status functioned as an absolute magical shield against the arbitrariness of local authorities and the cruelty of the garrisoned army. The holder of this title could travel freely throughout all the provinces, knowing that the might of the greatest state stood behind him. In the modern world, perhaps only high-ranking diplomats, with their international immunity, enjoy a similar level of protection. For an ordinary farmer from Gaul or Syria, obtaining such status seemed like a ticket to a completely different, safe reality. The privileges were not limited to security alone. They also included active participation in the political life of the metropolis. Only full citizens had the right to vote at assemblies in the capital, electing magistrates and influencing the passage of laws. Over time, the real significance of these elections diminished, but the very fact of having a political voice elevated a person above the crowd. It was a classic demonstration of power, showing the conquered peoples who exactly was the true master of the ancient world. Social division was deliberately maintained by the state to make citizenship the most coveted prize for ambitious people. The emperors understood perfectly well that if they handed out privileges freely, they would instantly lose their exceptional value. Scarcity breeds enormous demand, and Roman politicians exploited this basic economic law with frightening efficiency. Millions of provincials looked at their neighbors with Roman documents and desperately envied their unattainable prosperity. The most humiliating aspect for non-citizens was the constant reminder of their second-class status in everyday life. They were not allowed to wear the toga, which served as the official uniform and a visual marker of belonging to the empire's elite. Attempting to wear this uncomfortable woolen garment illegally was severely punished, as the state strictly guarded its symbols. This is comparable to a situation today where wearing a business suit were legally permitted only to a select caste of people. The Romans built a system in which status mattered more than a person's actual financial wealth. A wealthy merchant peregrinus might own ships and gold, But in the eyes of the law, he remained vulnerable to confiscation. A poor Roman peasant stood legally above even the wealthiest provincial, creating astonishing social paradoxes. Money could not buy absolute security unless it came with the coveted tablet of Roman citizenship. Such inequality could easily have led to endless uprisings and the collapse of the entire state system. But clever senators found a brilliant solution, offering the conquered peoples a clear path to integration. They told the provincials that elite status was not innate or unattainable. It could simply be earned through bloodshed. This promise worked better than any army, turning potential rebels into the most loyal servants of the great empire. Ultimately, this social division became the main driving force behind the territorial and military expansion of the ancient state. The Romans did not merely conquer new lands, they created an endless stream of motivated volunteers for their war machine. The price of admission was incredibly brutal, but the number of people willing to pay it only grew with each passing year. This mechanism for managing human ambition proved to be the strongest foundation of the entire Roman civilization. The primary and most widespread path to the coveted Roman passport was service in the auxiliary forces, known as the auxilia. Only active citizens were accepted into the legions, so the doors to the elite units were initially closed to provincials. The auxiliaries, however, gladly accepted strong young men from conquered tribes, promising them citizenship upon demobilization. It was the deal of the century where a man paid with his health and life for a line in the legal registry. Auxiliary troops often bore the heaviest and most dangerous service on the fringes of the ever-expanding empire. While legionaries built roads and guarded major headquarters, auxiliaries patrolled wild forests and were the first to face the barbarians' assaults. They were used as expendable troops in large-scale battles, deployed on the flanks or sent on suicide attacks. Modern military analysts would call this the use of hybrid forces to minimize casualties among the main elite units. Training in these units was no less grueling than the legendary, brutal training of the regular Roman legions. Recruits marched 30 kilometers a day, carrying heavy loads, dug endless trenches, and built fortifications. Many had to learn Latin from scratch, because all commands were given exclusively in the official language. Imagine a modern foreign legion, only without days off, vacations, and with wooden sticks instead of psychological support. Interestingly, the auxiliaries often retained their traditional weapons and familiar tribal combat styles. The Romans were incredibly pragmatic and understood that Syrian archers shot better than any native Italian. The Batavian cavalry could swim across rivers fully armored, which struck the empire's enemies with utter primal terror. The state took the best skills of the conquered peoples and integrated them into its flawless military machine. Service required a complete renunciation of one's former life and absolute loyalty to one's new military unit. Soldiers were sent to serve as far away from their homelands as possible to prevent them from participating in local uprisings. Celts from Britain were sent to the deserts of Syria, while Syrians were forced to freeze on the cold borders of Germany. This severed their old ties and compelled them to identify themselves entirely with the Roman army. Living conditions in the border camps were incredibly harsh and demanded phenomenal physical endurance. Soldiers slept 8 to a room in cramped barracks, ate hard grain, and washed it down with water mixed with cheap vinegar. Modern nutritionists would be horrified by such a diet, but this food provided the energy needed for hours-long marches. The state did not care about the soldiers' comfort. It cared only about their ability to kill enemies for long periods and effectively. Discipline was enforced through draconian methods, where the slightest offense was met with brutal physical punishment. Corporal punishment was the daily norm, and a soldier could be stoned to death simply for falling asleep on guard duty or showing cowardice in battle. The system stripped people of their individuality, turning them into perfect cogs in a vast imperial machine. The stress was unbearable, but the thought of future privileges made the men grit their teeth and endure. The hardest trial was the necessity of suppressing rebellions by fellow provincials, just like the soldiers themselves. The Romans forced auxiliary troops to kill their recent provincial neighbors for the sake of the distant Senate's interests. It was a brilliant psychological maneuver that permanently severed the bond between the auxiliary and his historical homeland. After that, a soldier could count only on the protection of the empire, becoming its submissive and passive instrument. Despite all the horrors of the war machine, The stream of volunteers into the auxiliary troops never dried up. For a young man from a poor village, the Army guaranteed steady food, a regular pay, and a chance to see the world. Those who successfully survived this hell received a military diploma, which was engraved on two small, fastened bronze plaques. This piece of metal became the most important thing in a veteran's life, confirming his new incredible status. The document was carefully preserved, passed down through generations, and often taken to the grave as a source of pride. For the sake of these plaques, hundreds of thousands of men marched unhesitatingly toward their deaths on the battlefields. A contract in the auxiliary forces was incredibly long, amounting to a full 25 years of continuous service. Today, contract soldiers serve for several years, and this is already considered a serious test of a person's mental and physical health. By the standards of antiquity, when the average life expectancy barely exceeded 40 years, such a term was effectively a lifetime commitment. The state demanded that a person give up their entire youth and prime years in exchange for a paper guarantee of a peaceful old age. The risk of not living to see the long-awaited demobilization was astronomically high and terrifying for every recruit. In those days, antibiotics did not exist, and any scratch from a dirty sword could lead to a painful death from blood poisoning. The battles were brutal in close quarters, where men killed each other with heavy blades at arm's length. The chance of surviving dozens of such meat grinders over the course of 25 years was close to a statistical error. However, the main threat came not even from enemy weapons, but from common camp infections and unsanitary conditions. Dysentery, typhus, and malaria killed Roman soldiers far more often and effectively than Germanic axes or Parthian arrows. The overcrowding in military camps created ideal conditions for the rapid spread of deadly diseases. Doctors tried to treat wounds with vinegar and honey, but their methods were utterly powerless against serious epidemics. Modern researchers have estimated that, at best, only half of all recruits survived to the end of their service. The rest remained lying on the battlefields or in hospital tents, never becoming Roman citizens. It was a cruel lottery where life was the stake, and the prize went only to the luckiest and genetically strongest. The state saved enormous amounts of money since dead soldiers did not need to be paid a generous severance package. Those who survived 10 years of service became incredibly experienced and ruthless professional killers. Their bodies were covered in scars, their muscles adapted to immense strain, and their minds completely blocked out the fear of death. They were no longer the naive country boys who had first arrived at the border recruitment station. The Roman army forged them into living weapons, capable of carrying out orders under any, even the most unbearable conditions. After 15 years of service, a soldier began to physically sense the approach of the long-awaited reward and status. During this period, many tried to avoid unnecessary risks in battle, preferring to act as cautiously and prudently as possible. Commanders fully understood this psychological trait of the old veterans and often kept them in reserve. It was in the empire's interest to preserve the lives of these experienced instructors so that they could train the next generation of cannon fodder. Survival in the Roman army required not only strength, but also incredible cunning, as well as the ability to make the right friends. Soldiers banded together in small groups that cooked meals together, shared loot, and covered for one another in formation. This military brotherhood became a new family for the auxiliary, replacing the one left behind in his distant home province. Only collective mutual aid helped them withstand the constant stress, the cold, and the superior forces of the enemy. When the day of discharge arrived, the surviving veteran experienced a shock comparable to being born anew. He turned in his government-issued weapon, received his severance pay, and those very bronze plaques bearing the emperor's seal. At that moment, his legal status soared to the heavens, making him untouchable by local authorities. A quarter-century of suffering, blood, and fear was left behind, opening the doors to a completely new, privileged world. These rugged old men returned to their hometowns not merely as heroes, but as representatives of a new provincial elite. They bought land, started families, and forever changed the social landscape of their small settlements. Local residents looked upon them with incredible respect and undisguised fear. Knowing of their dark military past, the survivors proved by their own example that the system worked, inspiring new boys to go to the recruitment centers. The main and most tangible advantage of a Roman passport was absolute legal protection of the individual. A citizen had the right to appeal directly to the emperor himself, which made him practically untouchable by provincial judges. This law, known as provocatio ad populum, literally saved people from the arbitrariness of corrupt local officials. In the ancient world, where human life was worth next to nothing, such a right was a true superhero's shield. No local magistrate had the right to subject a Roman citizen to torture or humiliating corporal punishment. While an ordinary peregrine could be whipped to death on mere suspicion, a citizen was required to be tried. Citizens were forbidden to be executed by shameful methods, such as crucifixion or being torn apart by wild animals. If a Roman committed a serious crime deserving of death, he was guaranteed a quick and honorable beheading by the sword. It sounds gruesome, but in those brutal times, the right to a quick death without public torment was considered an incredible privilege. Crucifixion was the fate of slaves, pirates, and rebels who lacked the coveted status of full citizens of the empire. In the realm of civil law, a Roman passport gave a colossal advantage in any property disputes. In court, a citizen's word always carried significantly more weight than the testimony of a dozen witnesses from the provinces. Roman judges subconsciously trusted their compatriots, considering them more reliable and honest by default. This created a massive imbalance of power, allowing passport holders to easily win disputes over land or debts. Provincial elites were well aware of the vulnerability of their position without reliable legal protection from Rome. A wealthy merchant without citizenship could lose his ships simply because a local governor decided to confiscate them. A citizen in the same situation could file a lawsuit in the capital and sue the overreaching official until he was completely ruined. This legal distinction compelled the wealthiest people in the Mediterranean to seek any means to obtain the coveted documents. Possessing status allowed a person to demand that their case be heard according to the strict norms of Roman law. Local laws were often archaic, unpredictable, and dependent on the whims of tribal chiefs or priests. Roman law offered clear procedures, written contracts, and logical precedents that ruled out sudden arbitrariness. For business people of that time, this was the only guarantee of stability in the volatile and dangerous ancient world. Even visually, citizens behaved quite differently in court, demonstrating their confidence and superiority. They knew their rights, could hire the best lawyers, and demand respectful treatment. Peregrines usually begged for mercy on their knees, while Romans demanded justice, looking the judge straight in the eye. This psychological difference shaped the unique mindset of an imperial nation accustomed to ruling the world. As a result, legal protection became the most powerful tool of assimilation ever devised in human history. People did not simply want to live in the empire, they wanted to become its full-fledged and protected stakeholders. The right to a fair trial transformed the brutal state, in the eyes of the conquered peoples, into a guarantor of civilization and order. And for the sake of this order, hundreds of thousands of people were willing to die on the frontiers in the ranks of auxiliary troops. Legal status granted access to an incredibly important economic tool that the Romans called commercium. It was the exclusive right to enter into contracts recognized and protected by the full force of the state judicial system. Peregrines could trade among themselves, but their transactions relied solely on their word of honor and fragile local customs. A Roman contract was an ironclad document. Violating it threatened the offender with immediate ruin through the courts. Without this right, it was absolutely impossible to legally acquire land within Italy itself or in the colonies. All real estate of the highest class was available exclusively to people possessing the appropriate civic status. A modern person can easily buy an apartment in another country, but in Rome, the market for prime land was strictly closed off. This artificial restriction kept wealth within the privileged caste and prevented foreigners from buying up the empire. Marriage contracts were also strictly regulated by status and directly influenced the financial well-being of future generations. If a Roman man married a woman without citizenship, their children received no rights and could not legally inherit property. This forced wealthy families to seek partners exclusively within their own narrow, privileged social circle. The economy and the law were intertwined into a single mechanism that reliably protected the wealth of the patricians from random outsiders. Government contracts for road construction, tax collection, and supplying the massive army were awarded only to citizens. These contracts yielded fabulous profits, creating an entire class of incredibly wealthy businessmen known as the equities. Non-citizens could only be small subcontractors, doing the dirtiest work for mere pennies. The empire fed its own, leaving the provincials only pitiful crumbs from the vast state table. This economic monopoly created an insurmountable barrier for the most talented artisans and merchants among the conquered peoples. No matter how hard a Syrian merchant worked, he always hit the glass ceiling of his limited rights. The only way out was to gain status through bribes, service, or the patronage of a powerful Roman patron. Economic pressure forced people to integrate into the system much faster than the threat of military invasion. This economic model made Rome not just a military capital, but also the main financial center of the entire ancient world. All the wealth of the Mediterranean slowly but surely flowed into the hands of those who possessed the coveted legal status. They invested in vast estates, bought thousands of slaves, and built luxurious villas on the shores of the warm sea. This economic success clearly demonstrated to the provincials the benefits of loyalty to the central government. That is precisely why the price of citizenship was so high. It literally opened the door to unlimited wealth. People risked their lives in the legions, not just for a piece of copper, but for the opportunity to conduct business legally and protect their capital. The Romans ingeniously linked the thirst for money with loyalty to the state, creating the most stable economy of antiquity. It was ancient capitalism, where a company's main asset was a proper entry in the legal registry. The financial advantages of a Roman passport were so immense that they justified any risks involved in obtaining it. The most significant benefit over the centuries was the complete exemption of citizens from paying the direct poll tax. This tax fell as a heavy burden on the shoulders of all other inhabitants of the empire, draining them of their last resources. It was as if, today, holders of elite credit cards were completely exempt from income tax. In addition to the poll tax, citizens were often exempt from various local levies, customs duties, and road taxes. When a Roman merchant transported his goods through the provinces, his profits remained virtually untouched by the state. A peregrine traveling the same route had to pay at every checkpoint, which made his goods completely uncompetitive. The empire deliberately created ideal conditions for its citizens to conduct highly profitable business. The logic behind this decision seems insane, but to Roman politicians, it was crystal clear and pragmatic. Free bread prevented the vast masses of unemployed poor people from rising up and burning the capital to the ground. In addition, politicians used these handouts to buy the loyalty of the crowd ahead of important magistrate elections. No non-citizen, not even the poorest and hungriest, was entitled to receive the state ration. Along with bread, the state provided its citizens with free or incredibly cheap entertainment on a grand scale. Gladiatorial combats, chariot races in the Great Circus, and theatrical productions were sponsored by the imperial budget. For those with status, admission to these spectacular spectacles was open, creating the illusion of a luxurious and joyful life. The famous bread and circuses formula worked perfectly, transforming an aggressive crowd into obedient spectators. Tax breaks made obtaining this status the most profitable investment a person could make in their entire life. A veteran who survived 25 years of service did not merely gain prestige, he freed his family from financial hardship. The money saved on taxes allowed him to get rich quickly, buy good land, and hire workers. The state took away his youth, but in return gave him absolute financial independence in old age. From the perspective of modern economics, such a system was bound to collapse under the weight of its own costs. And ultimately, after several centuries, the number of citizens became so large that the benefits had to be abolished. But at the height of the empire's power, this social contract functioned with flawless and frightening efficiency. Rome bought the peace of its own people at the cost of ruthlessly plundering all the other conquered peoples. This makes one wonder how little the basic principles of governing the masses have changed over 2,000 years. Give people economic benefits, provide for their basic needs, and throw in some spectacular entertainment in the stadiums. In return, they will forgive the authorities for any political decisions and will be genuinely proud of their superiority over foreigners. The Romans perfected this formula long before the advent of modern political strategists. Obtaining a Roman passport was not merely a personal victory for an individual, it was a tectonic shift for his entire lineage. The right of connubium played a key role in this, allowing a citizen to enter into a legal marriage with a Roman woman. Only in such a union did the children born automatically inherit their parents' highest legal status. If a soldier survived and received his diploma, his sons and grandsons were born as full-fledged masters of the empire. This mechanism turned long military service into the most profitable investment in the future of one's family. The grandson of a simple, illiterate peasant from Gaul, thanks to his grandfather's blood, could run for public office. He could become a lawyer, a legion commander, or even a tax collector in his native province. In a single generation, a family bridged a chasm that in other cultures took centuries to cross. Without citizenship, any serious political or military career within the imperial system was absolutely impossible. A local aristocrat might be a king in his tribe, but to Rome, he remained merely a useful tool. The integration of new citizens also changed the very structure of Roman society, making it more flexible and resilient. The children of veterans often became ideal administrators, as they understood both Roman laws and local customs. They spoke two languages and could effectively govern territories without provoking the population into armed revolts. The empire gained ideal middle managers, loyal to Rome, but understood by the provincials. Of course, the old Roman aristocracy viewed these new citizens with incredible arrogance and contempt. The patricians considered those from the provinces to be uncouth barbarians who had accidentally gained access to respectable society. However, money and real power quickly smoothed over these cultural barriers in the harsh realities of ancient politics. When the son of a former Syrian mercenary bought a huge villa next door, the senators had to put up with his presence. Citizenship granted access to the empire's two highest classes, the equites and, at the very top, the senators. To become an equite, one needed immense wealth, but without citizenship, money meant nothing. This property qualification forced new citizens to engage desperately in business, to advance their children even further. The state reaped enormous economic activity from people striving to prove their worth. The most striking proof of this system's success was the emergence of emperors born far beyond the borders of Italy. Trajan, Hadrian, Septimius Severus, all were descendants of people who had long ago been integrated into the Roman system. It is hard to believe, but the greatest state of antiquity was ruled by people whose ancestors were once considered filthy barbarians. This was the triumph of the Roman concept of assimilation, where legal status proved more important than ethnic origin. For an ordinary provincial family, obtaining a diploma meant an instant transition into the ranks of the local elite. Neighbors began to treat them with respect. They were given the best seats at local festivals and in theaters. Their daughters became sought-after brides, as marriage to a citizen elevated the status of any local merchant. This was social superiority, confirmed by the seal of the most powerful state on the planet. Thus, the true price of citizenship was measured not only by years of suffering, but also by the magnitude of the reward received. A man broke his spirit on the marches and risked being killed not for the sake of abstract pride or a bronze plaque. They did it so that their great-grandchildren would never know what hunger, lawlessness, and the humiliation of the lash were like. It was a cruel but incredibly fair deal between the little man and the ruthless state machine. Sometimes Rome realized that issuing passports one person at a time was too slow and utterly ineffective for grand politics. In times of serious crisis or to reward loyal regions, the empire could grant citizenship to entire cities. This was a powerful diplomatic tool that instantly transformed potentially hostile territories into reliable strongholds of Roman influence. Modern countries use similar methods, issuing passports en masse in disputed territories to integrate them. This step permanently altered the structure of the state, transforming it from a hegemonic city-state into a unified and monolithic Italian nation. Following this precedent, the collective granting of city status became the standard solution for stabilizing complex and turbulent provinces. If a Gallic city voluntarily surrendered its weapons and paid taxes, its elite could receive the coveted citizenship tablets en masse. This was far cheaper and safer than maintaining an expensive and aggressive military garrison in every settlement. Such integration benefited not only Rome, but also the local aristocrats, who wished to retain their real power. Upon becoming citizens, Celtic chieftains or rulers of Greek city-states received the support of Roman legions against their rivals. They changed their unpronounceable names to classical Roman ones, donned togas, and began building baths instead of tribal huts. It was a corporate merger deal where the local elite became a branch of a vast transnational empire. The Romanization of the provinces proceeded rapidly precisely because of this incredible thirst for collective legal status. Cities competed with one another to build temples to the emperors, hoping that the Senate would notice their loyalty and elevate their status. Settlements that received the status of a municipality or colony were exempted from certain taxes and granted the right to self-government. The inhabitants of these cities began to sincerely consider themselves true Romans, looking down with contempt upon their unassimilated neighbors. However, the state was incredibly calculating and never handed out such generous gifts simply out of kindness. Upon receiving collective citizenship, the city was obligated to supply recruits not to auxiliary troops, but to the elite legions. The city's economy became fully integrated into the imperial system, and all its resources began to work for the benefit of the distant capital. It was an elegant form of subjugation, in which the victim herself begged to be bound by golden legal chains. By that time, the treasury was empty, and the old tax exemptions for citizens were creating a massive hole in the state budget. Caracalla granted citizenship to everyone in order to force them to pay new taxes that had previously applied only to those with privileged status. Moreover, this expanded the pool of recruits for the legions, which were constantly suffering from a shortage of fresh cannon fodder. What had been considered the highest privilege for centuries suddenly turned into a universal and burdensome tax obligation. After this edict, the concept of a Roman citizen finally lost its original sacred and elitist meaning. When everyone has the status, from a destitute Egyptian peasant to a British coal miner, it ceases to be a source of pride. Society quickly found new ways to divide people, categorizing them as more honorable and lower based on wealth. The legal magic of the passport vanished, giving way to the banal wealth inequality of late antiquity. But before this historical moment, the system of collective citizenship had managed to fulfill its main and great task. It united the scattered peoples of the Mediterranean into a single cultural space, the remnants of which still exist today. The Gauls, Spaniards, and Syrians came to consider themselves part of a single great civilization thanks to Rome's ingenious legal bait. No other empire of antiquity was able to replicate this incredible scale of voluntary assimilation of millions of people. Where there is a massive shortage and incredible demand for privileges, corruption of unprecedented scale always flourishes. Far from every wealthy peregrine wanted to spend 25 years of his life marching knee-deep in muddy swamps. It was much easier to buy the coveted legal status by exploiting loopholes in the vast and unwieldy Roman bureaucracy. The trade in the citizenship became one of the most profitable and risky underground businesses in the ancient state. The simplest and most common method was a direct bribe to a greedy Roman official or provincial governor. Governors wielded immense power and could enter the right people into special registers under the guise of a reward for loyalty. Naturally, this loyalty was measured in full-weight gold coins settling into the personal coffers of the high-ranking, corrupt official. The modern world, with its trade in golden passports, has invented absolutely nothing new in this criminal scheme. Clever officials didn't just sell status. They demanded that the buyer become their political client and sponsor. A wealthy provincial received the documents, but in return was obligated to support his patron financially in the capital's elections. This created powerful corruption networks where Roman aristocrats amassed a host of wealthy and utterly loyal debtors. The system benefited everyone involved, except for the honest legionnaires, who rotted for years in damp border trenches. Wealthy freedmen also exploited a complex loophole in the law to secure citizenship for their children. A Roman could free his slave, and the slave would become a citizen, albeit with certain social restrictions. Knowing this, some free peregrines would fictitiously sell themselves into slavery to a corrupt Roman patron for a huge sum of money. The patron would immediately free them, and they would legally obtain the necessary document, having deceived the entire state system. Roman emperors were well aware of these schemes and periodically conducted large-scale inspections and harsh purges. Special commissions traveled through the provinces, demanding that suspicious citizens present proof of their legal status. During such inspections, thousands of people were stripped of all their property overnight, and their families were sent to slave markets. The state demonstrated its power, reminding everyone that only it held a monopoly on the distribution of social privileges. Interestingly, over time, bribes for citizenship became so commonplace that they were even mentioned in the Bible. In the Acts of the Apostles, a Roman tribune honestly admits to Paul that he acquired his citizenship for a very large sum of money. This shows that by the 1st century CE, the system had already begun to rot from within under the pressure of vast capital. Citizenship gradually transformed from a reward for bloodline into a common, expensive commodity for elite consumption. Despite all the risks, the black market for Roman passports continued to function steadily for several centuries. Human nature always seeks shortcuts, especially when it comes to absolute legal and economic protection. The desire to safeguard their capital compelled even the most cautious merchants to risk their lives for a fake bronze tablet. This proves that the empire's bureaucratic walls were never completely impenetrable to those with gold. Ultimately, this corruption became one of the reasons for the degradation of the very concept of Roman citizenship. When you can simply buy a ticket into an elite club, the club inevitably loses its mystical and exclusive aura. Soldiers on the frontiers began to lose motivation, realizing that their sacrifices were not as valuable as they once were. The sale of passports enriched hundreds of officials, but dealt irreparable damage to the moral foundation of the entire ancient state. Roman citizenship was incredibly difficult to obtain, but it could be lost in a matter of minutes in a courtroom. The empire did not forgive treason, and the primary instrument of punishment was a procedure known as capitis deminutio. This legal term literally meant the deprivation of legal capacity, transforming a person from the master of their own life into a complete outcast. The state could take away absolutely everything for which a family had labored and shed blood over several generations. The most heinous crime, leading to the immediate loss of status, was treason or insulting the emperor's majesty. For such offenses, a person was not merely stripped of their rights. All their property was completely confiscated for the bottomless imperial treasury. The traitor's name was erased from all monuments, and his family was condemned to absolute poverty and public disgrace. It was an ancient culture of excommunication. Only the consequences were not virtual, but deadly real and devastating. A legionary could lose his citizenship for cowardice on the battlefield, desertion, or disobeying a direct order. The army was held together by iron discipline, and a man who broke his oath automatically ceased to be part of Roman society. Such individuals were often publicly flogged, expelled from the camp in disgrace, and permanently struck from all records. For a professional soldier, this meant instant social death and the loss of all accumulated pension savings. There was also a scenario in which a citizen could lose their status due to massive, unpaid financial debts. In the early periods of Roman history, creditors had the legal right to sell a debtor into slavery outside the state. By becoming a slave, a person automatically lost all their civil rights, turning into a talking tool of labor with no future. Later, this cruel practice was mitigated, but financial bankruptcy still led to a catastrophic drop in social status. Interestingly, one could also lose one's status voluntarily if a person decided to move to an independent state. Roman pride did not allow for dual citizenship with territories that were not subject to the Senate and the emperor. If a Roman left to live among the Germans or Parthians, the empire automatically removed him from its legal system. The state demanded absolute and undivided loyalty from its people, tolerating no compromises on their part. Loss of citizenship nullified marriage contracts and deprived children of all rights to inherit from their convicted father. The system was designed so that the punishment of one person would ricochet to affect his entire immediate circle. This created a powerful mechanism of collective control where relatives themselves monitored the behavior of their family members. The fear of depriving their children of a future served as the best deterrent against participating in any political conspiracies or rebellions. The existence of such a harsh punishment mechanism kept the value of citizenship at the highest possible level among the entire population. People understood that status was not an inalienable right from birth, but a privilege that had to be earned daily through loyalty. The empire bestowed immense benefits, but in return kept every subject on a tight and strict legal leash. The fragility of this position forced the elite to be cautious and not cross the line in the games for real power. As a result, the system of punishments was a mirror image of the system of rewards, creating a perfect balance of fear and ambition. Rome ruled millions of people not only with sharp gladiuses, but also with ingenious legal constructs. Citizenship was the carrot that compelled barbarians to serve Rome, while the fear of losing it was the stick that controlled the elite itself. This complex political machine functioned flawlessly for hundreds of years, leaving an indelible mark on the history of all human civilization. The Roman citizenship system was perhaps the most successful social experiment in the history of political governance of the masses. The empire proved that people's loyalty could be bought by offering them a clear contract with guaranteed privileges. No army in the world could have held such vast territories by force if millions of inhabitants had not wanted to become Romans. This mechanism of assimilation transformed a modest city on 7 hills into the undisputed ruler of the entire known ancient world. The price of obtaining these rights was monstrously high, requiring people to renounce their roots and endure decades of bloody service. But those who passed this ancient test of survival inscribed their names forever in the history of the great empire. Today, lawyers study Roman law, forgetting that behind every line of it lie the fates of people who gave their lives for social status. It was a cruel, cynical, yet incredibly effective game, the rules of which forever changed the face of European civilization.